Meghan Markle here.
Today is June 2nd, 2025. It is 6:38 a.m. So this video, I keep on pushing it back because it's a very long video and I'm curious to know what they are talking about. So I'm finally gonna cover it. Whenever I get a chance to edit it, I'll edit. Alright, never forget King Charles took his son Prince Harry's security and leaked his location to the press. When Prince Harry took his family and went to another country for safety, King Charles contacted every country telling them not to provide security. King Charles is evil. So let's listen. Okay, it's a small little review.
Welcome to BBC News. Now, in an exclusive interview with BBC News, Prince Harry has said he is devastated about losing his latest legal challenge over the security he receives when he's in the UK. The Duke of Sussex's taxpayer-funded protection was downgraded back in 2020 after he stopped being a working royal. Well, he appealed.
Let's not forget the working royal. It's his brother who kicked him out. Okay, because Harry and Meghan wanted to continue be a working royal.
So, in conclusion, if you'd had the support, you'd still be there.
Without question.
Yeah.
I'm sad that what's happened has happened, but I know and I'm comfortable knowing that we did everything that we could to make it work, and we did everything on the exit process the way that it should have been
with
done.
As much respect.
With as much
and,
respect.
Oh my God, we just did everything we could to protect them.
Okay, keep that in mind. Even in the Oprah interview, Harry said that both of them, they wanted to stay and work, but when it comes to the Sandringham summit, William put it in writing and kicked him out.
Began to address Granny about the 5 options. Your Majesty, you've seen the 5 options? Yes, she said. We all had. They'd been emailed to us. 5 different ways of proceeding. Option 1 was continuance of the status quo. Meg and I don't leave. Everyone tries to go back to normal. Option 5 was full severance. No royal role, no working for Granny, and total loss of security. Option 3 was somewhere in between. A compromise, closest to what we'd originally proposed. I told everyone assembled that, above all, I was desperate to keep security. That was what worried me most, my family's physical safety. I wanted to prevent a repeat of history, another untimely death like the one that had rocked this family to its core 23 years earlier, and from which we were still trying to recover. I'd consulted with several palace veterans, people who knew the inner workings of the monarchy and its history, and they all said option 3 was best for all parties. Meg and I living elsewhere part of the year, continuing our work, retaining security, returning to Britain for charities, ceremonies, events. Sensible solution, these palace veterans said, and eminently doable. But the family, of course, pushed me to take option 1. Barring that, they would only accept option 5. We discussed the 5 options for nearly an hour. At last, the bee got up and went round the table, handing out a draft of a statement the palace would soon be releasing, announcing implementation of option 5. Wait, I'm confused. You've already drafted a statement? Before any discussion? Announcing option 5? In other words, the fix was in this whole time? This summit was just for show? No answer.
So let's continue. So this needs to be set. Okay?
Arguing he was singled out for different, unjustified and inferior treatment. But 3 judges at the Court of Appeal today rejected that appeal. Well, now, following that judgment, he's told the BBC that it is currently impossible for him and his family to return to the UK. He's also said that because of the current situation, his father, the King, isn't speaking to him. Well, Prince Harry is currently living in California, where he's been speaking to our correspondent Neda Tawfik, and we can bring you that extended interview now.
Okay.
Obviously,
So this is an old interview. I didn't know it was that, but it came under my timeline May 30th at the end of last month. But once I saw the timing, I keep on pushing it back. All right. So let's listen.
pretty gutted about the decision. We thought it was going to go our way, but it certainly has proven that there was no way to win this through the courts. Wish someone had told me that beforehand. Yeah, the decision has been a surprise as well as not a surprise. For the time being, it's impossible for me to take my family back to the UK.
And let's give Harry credit where credit is due, because now he closed all possibilities where in the future for the firm, if it still exists, to say that they were trying to give him security, but it's him who refused, because this is the thing they're saying Princess Diana did not want security. So Harry closed all the doors. He took it as far as he could to shut this narrative down. Okay, so let's continue.
Safely.
You're obviously very deeply affected by this. What memories, experiences had you hoped your children, Archie and Lilibet, would have had that you think they won't be able to now with this decision?
Well, for a start, the only time that I've come back to the UK is sadly for funerals or court cases, with the odd charitable function where I can in between that. I put myself at risk for
That's
that,
right.
but I will continue on with a life of public service, so I will always support the charities and the people that mean so much to me. I can't see a world in which I would be bringing my wife and children back to the UK at this point. And the things that they're going to miss is, well, everything. You know, I love my country. I always have done, despite what some people in that country have done.
This is something he has been saying. Even when he was leaving the UK at the Centre Bally thing, the speech that he did at the Centre Bally thing, he said almost the same thing. The UK is my home, that will never change, and da-da-da. So he's repeating the same thing.
I must say that I can only imagine what you may have heard or perhaps read over the past few weeks. So I want you to hear the truth from me, as much as I can share, not as a prince or a duke, but as Harry, the same person that many of you have watched grow up over the last 35 years, but now with a clearer perspective. The UK is my home and a place that I love. That will never change.
So, you know, I miss the UK. I miss parts of the UK, of course I do. And I think it's really quite sad that I won't be able to show, you know, my children my homeland. You know.
And as you say, you've gone back several times during this years-long battle. What about the security arrangements that were in place made you feel it would be unsafe for you and your family?
There's only so much that I can say because of the redaction process and the national security matters at hand, but everything. Because in beginning of 2020, I was scored the highest as far as risk was concerned, and then overnight I was reduced to the lowest without actually going through the risk management board. So one does question how that is even possible and also the motive behind that at the time. And that was in 2020. And as hard as it is to appreciate or understand why the decision was made the way that it was in 2020, the hardest thing for me has been the fix of that decision for the last 5 years.
But there were many serious, credible threats against Meghan, were there, emanating from the far right?
Absolutely. If you'd seen the stuff that was written and you were receiving it, the kind of rhetoric that's online, if you don't know what I know, you would feel under threat all of the time.
So you were convinced that there was a genuine threat to Meghan's life on on more than one occasion, on several occasions?
we had teams investigating it. People have been prosecuted for those.
The fact that I still haven't had a risk management board assessment done for me over the last 5 years. Everybody else within this group of people get it at the minimum once a year. So again,
So what he's saying here, they made the decision without even doing the process of seeing how high his safety is, whatever that process is, risk, whatever he's saying here. So they made the decision by skipping all the steps to see how much of a danger he's in. My goodness. And then we are aware that Charles have a say. He could easily give him the security. When Harry left, when it was announced that Charles had cancer, all right, Harry rushed to go to the UK. He didn't even give 28 days notice. Guess what? The security was provided for him. So, which means Charles has a say if he could get the security that he's looking for. But he refused to give it to him. All right? And then, let's not forget, all this started, they set their foundation. Remove the Queen's private secretary and change it and give Edward Young. Remove Lord Gates and put Edward Young, which Edward Young was someone of Charles who will listen to what Charles says. And then ever since then, things never the same. And some of the people who works in the palace for Charles also work in Warwick. All right, so let's continue.
Yeah, I would not have taken this far if I didn't have compelling evidence of facts that reveal why the decision was made. And I'm sitting here today talking to you where, we've lost the appeal, but the other side have won in keeping me unsafe. So again, there's a lot of question marks that a lot of people will have. I have.
Yeah, and the other one keep on stirring the pot, putting his life in danger, trigger people to do harm to him. Bag it for God. Let's continue.
All of the truth. I have all of the knowledge now throughout the legal process. I've uncovered my worst fears. And to now know today, based on this judgment, that there was no legal framework that constrains the decisions of this body, RABEC, of which the royal household sit on. And I didn't know that until this legal process in 2021. One of the first things my lawyer said to me was, as disclosure started, or as this process started, she turned around and said, "Did you know that the royal household sat on RABEC?" And my jaw hit the floor.
Well, I want to ask you about that because the King's private secretary sits on RABEC now.
There it is. I just told you.
Do you wish your father...
And another person as well, but yes.
Let me remind it. Let's listen.
To now know today, based on this judgment, that there was no legal framework that constrains the decisions of this body, RABEC, of which the royal household sit on. And I didn't know that until this legal process in 2021. One of the first things my lawyer said to me was, as disclosure started, or as this process started, she turned around and said, "Did you know that the royal household sat on RABEC?" And my jaw hit the floor.
Well, I want to ask you about that because the King's private secretary sits on RABEC now.
Sir Clive Alderton, yeah.
Okay,
Do
that's
you
him,
wish
And,
your
and,
father...
and another person as well, but yes.
Do you wish your father had intervened, despite how that may have looked?
I've never asked him to intervene. I've asked him to step out of the way and let the experts do their job. This RABEC committee is an expert committee full of professionals, plus the royal household. And the royal household don't have any role in that, on the RABEC committee, other than the helping influence the decisions based on members of the royal family. And 5 years later, every single visit that I do back to the UK has to go through the royal household. My representative on the RABEC committee, still to this day, is the royal household. That is not a decision that I choose. I am forced to go through the royal household and accept that they are putting my best interests forward during these conversations in the deliberations. So no, I haven't asked my father to intervene. The whole point of a risk management board, which, as I said, everybody else gets, but I haven't, never been given since back end of 2019 was the last one that I was given. The whole point of that is to have a board and a risk assessment, a separate board from RAVEC that considers all of the facts and all the circumstances. It is a system and an assessment that is designed to be non-biased and to avoid interference.
If I'm not mistaken, Sir Clive Editon, whatever the guy he just said, I have a screenshot of it. Was he the one who told Harry not to sue something? Okay, sort of threatened Harry for something? But yet he sit on the board of RAVEC? I mean, you know he was gonna... But I think Harry knew, but let's continue.
I know throughout this legal process is the interference that was created came from the royal household. And the RAVEC chair at the time, who I believe I can talk about because he's no longer there, Sir Richard Mottram, the first thing he did, well, the first people that he went to go and see was the royal household at the palace. So whether
Okay, my son just left. Let's
whether it's the
continue.
media or whether it's anybody else that claims that the royal household and my father and my family don't have any decision-making capabilities on RAVEC, well then what's their role? They're not experts. What's their role on that? And Sir Richard Mottram emailed back in January of 2020 that an RMB would be necessary before taking my security away. After his visit to the palace, that RMB that was planned was abandoned in favour of alternative governance measures.
What the court decided today was that they were justified for 4 reasons to not have that review. And a major part of that is because you're no longer a working royal, a change in your status. Do you not accept that from the court?
Well, my status hasn't changed. It can't change. I am who I am. I am part of what I'm part of, and I can never escape that.
That's right. He is part of the royal family. He's a blood royal. His father is the king. And then let's not forget again, it's not him who did not want to stay. They kick him out.
So in conclusion, if you'd had the support, you'd still be there?
Without question.
Yeah.
I'm sad that what's happened has happened, but I know and I'm comfortable knowing that we did everything that we could to make it work, and we did everything on the exit process the way that it should have been
with
done.
as much respect.
With as much
and,
respect.
Oh my God, we just did everything we could to protect them.
And then they create all this animosity afterward to prevent him from getting the security. He will still be Charles' son. He will still be Prince Harry, the son of the king. That's what, and part of the thing that he just said is part of that. His status will never change. He is still blood royal.
My circumstances will always be the same. But with a specific answer to the question, there are comparisons that exist. And again, I have to be careful what I say, but I think it would be quite shocking for the British public and the public at large to understand or know that, in fact, many people do know this, that people who leave public office receive lifetime protection.
Okay, like Liz Truss, like 45 days being prime minister. Who else? There are celebrities who have got the similar type of protection he's asking for, but they won't give it to him. All right, so that's what he meant by comparison to his status, especially Liz Truss, 45 days being prime minister. Okay, every prime minister who leave office, they get that kind of security. And then I believe she get 120 something thousand pounds. I don't know if it's per year or whatever, but let's continue.
Regardless of whether there are threats or risks to them. So for me, with a whole list of risks and threats that were known about in 2020 and that have only increased over time, including the Al-Qaeda threat that was published and talked about recently, completely disregarded, thrown away, ignored, because for me, security was made conditional on having that official role. That role that everybody knows, that myself and my wife wished to carry on, but was stopped from being able to do that. Back in 2020.
What do you say to those who ask, why should the taxpayer pay for your police security if you have your own private security? Where are the gaps there? What's your response to those who say you're getting police protection on a case-by-case basis?
I tell you, why don't you ask that question again, but in 3 parts, if you could? Because you just put 3 very, very important questions together.
Sure.
And I can't possibly answer all 3 of them at the same time.
Sure. What do you say to those who ask why the UK taxpayer should pay for police security? You have your own private security.
I mean, Harry is brilliant. Okay, one of the things I was going to say is that Harry is brilliant. The question that was asked, he wants the reporter to separate it into individual part. A lot of the derangers keep on saying, why do the taxpayers have to pay for his security? So this is the part here where he's gonna respond to.
Well, first off, private security can only do so much. Again, I can't go into the details of that, but I think most people will be able to work that out. One of the major things is they don't have jurisdiction in a foreign country, or in any country. They don't have any jurisdiction. Police protection is effective protection, which is what my grandmother made very clear that we needed. With regard to the taxpayer part of it, I don't need to go into detail how much the royal family costs or how much protection costs or whatever. What I will say is that some of the British tabloid press did a very good job in campaigning to have our security removed by quoting figures such as £20 million. Right, and through this disclosure process, I've seen constituents in the UK write to their MP saying, as a taxpayer, I don't want to pay for Meghan and Harry's security at this cost. They're literally quoting headlines from British newspapers. Those figures are obviously grossly exaggerated by about 18, 19 times.
Wow.
And further to that, if you know that other people are being protected, people that have made a choice for public office, then why wouldn't you be comfortable, happy with someone in my position who's given 35 years service to his country, 2 tours of Afghanistan?
Good.
And the threats and risks to my life, I was born into this position.
That's
I was born into those risks, and they've only increased over time, along with my marriage to Meghan, and the frenzy across media, mainstream media and social media that created. So, and I guess on top of that as well, probably what people don't know, but that is mentioned in the judgment today, RAVEC protect private citizens. I was made a private citizen by the royal household, not by RAVEC.
Thank you.
The royal household.
Okay, this is what I mean. They kick him out. The royal family made him a private citizen. That's part of it where they kick him out. Okay? So let's see here. Let's continue.
Be a private citizen. I will never be seen as a private citizen. I will never be treated as a private citizen. Not by the media, not by most people, and certainly not by anybody that wants to harm me or my wife or our kids. So I think once people realize or understand that there are private citizens who have never played any role in public office and never will play any public role, that because they are high risk, they are protected at taxpayers' expense, and rightly so, because it will affect not only with that person, could they end up in hospital or worse on UK soil, but it comes down to impact, and it comes down to the reputational impact of the UK if that person or those people are injured on UK soil. But
Okay.
apparently for me, that doesn't matter.
Wow.
And just to be absolutely clear, what is the difference between the top level security you say you should have and the security you are given on this case by case?
The thing he was talking about other people being injured and UK soil, that has to do with, I believe, Taylor Swift. Okay, but let me move it back slightly. Let's continue.
Because they are high risk, they are protected at taxpayers' expense, and rightly so, because it will affect not only with that person, could they end up in hospital, or worse, on UK soil, but it comes down to impact, and it comes down to the reputational impact of the UK if that person or those people are injured on UK soil. But apparently for me, that doesn't matter.
And just to be absolutely clear, what is the difference between the top level security you say you should have and the security you are given on this case by case basis when you go
So
to
the details of the security I can't talk about. All I will say is that the last R&B assessment that I was given, I scored the highest. The only person within the family that scored anywhere near that was my grandmother. Overnight, I was reduced to the lowest. This case-by-case basis has been used by RAVEC and also by large sections of the British press to say, well, what's the big problem? You're given something on a case-by-case basis. Unfortunately, that case-by-case basis is separated by the reason for my visit. Sorry, just to give you more context on that. It's not really a case-by-case basis. It's an either-or. If you're invited to the UK by your family, then we will give you security. If you come for any other reason, then you will get a very low amount of security. I'm not going to confirm what that is, but it is completely insufficient. Somewhere along the line, people have talked about the fact that it really, all it is someone on the end of a phone. So, no matter how much private security I have around me, there's only so much that I can do and operate and function within the UK when it comes to supporting my charities, visiting my friends, all of these things. So, I've been treated very, very, very differently to everybody else that exists. All examples that exist, past, present, I have been singled out.
You've spoken very openly about the fact that you think you've been punished for leaving the monarchy. Who specifically do you think is trying to punish you?
I don't think that anymore. Now I know that it was, security was used as leverage. And I think what really worries me more than anything else about today's decision, depending on what happens next, is that it's set a new precedent that security can be used to control members of the family.
Wow.
And effectively what it does is imprison other members of the family from being able to choose a different life.
Very interesting.
If for me security is conditional on having an official role, one that both myself and my wife wished to carry on, but then was rejected, not by RAVEC, was rejected by the royal household, and the result to that is you lose your security. That basically says that you can't live outside of their control.
That's a very interesting point. And when I think it was sometime last week, I was seeing the York sisters and Fergie was talking, doing some sort of engagement. I didn't really share them, but I did see it. And it also reminded me, there was pictures that was going around where the York sisters were having lunch with that guy who wrote that piece about Meghan being dragged and all of that. That was what, last year or the year before? So all of this, so I could understand what Heavy's saying here. And I think I have said I could understand why the York sisters will submit or do whatever the other brothers saying, because they don't have, as a woman, they don't have that much capability as Heavy does. So yes, I agree with Heavy. They're using the security as a way to chain those people in. And that's also bring to mind when Heavy said the royal family are trapped. That's what they're doing.
I'm acutely aware of where my family stand and how scared they are of the tabloids turning on them.
Turning on them for what? They're the royal family.
Yes, but it's there is this invisible, what's termed or referred to as the invisible contract behind closed doors between the institution and the tabloids, UK tabloids.
How so?
Well, it is to simplify. It's a case of if you as a family member are willing to wine, dine, and give full access to these reporters, then you will get better press.
What do you care about better press if you're royal?
I think everyone needs to have some compassion for them in that situation, right? There is a level of control by fear that has existed for generations. I mean,
But who's controlling?
My father and my brother, they are trapped. They don't get to leave. And I have huge compassion for that.
Okay, so let's continue.
If you want to be safe. But so there's a pretty hard decision there. And I think if you strip away all the noise of everything that's been said by other people and all the noise that's been created around this, if you strip that all away, I think what people will hear is that the only thing that I've been asking for throughout this whole process is safety.
Mm-hmm.
Both when I was when I was part of the institution and when we left. And the important piece here, Neda, is, you know, for me and my wife. Well, I mean, I'm not sure how much I can say, but well, I can never leave the royal family. Yeah, that is my family. That is my larger family.
Mm-hmm.
I left the institution because at the end of the day I had to. I didn't leave it in 2020. I left it in 2021. But security was removed in 2020.
Okay.
Speaking
That's
of
the
your
thing.
family,
They kick him out.
your father is ill with cancer. Will you continue to visit him alone without the family? Where does this leave things moving forward? The ability of your children to see their grandfather?
You know, life is a precious thing, and I'm acutely aware of the fragility of that. I can only come to the UK safely if I'm invited. And you know, there is a lot of control and ability in my father's hands. Ultimately, this whole thing could be resolved through him, not necessarily by intervening, but by stepping aside, allowing the experts to do what is necessary and to carry out an RMB. That said, this all was initiated under a previous government. And there is now a new government. I have had it described to me, once people knew about the facts, that this is an good old-fashioned establishment stitch-up, and that's what it feels like.
So should Keir Starmer step in?
I think that, you know, based on the judgment that the court has put out today, it clearly states that RAVEC aren't constrained by law. Again, I wish somebody had said that from the beginning. If they're not constrained by law, then this decision was made by the royal prerogative, which means that on national security matters, my case, which the other side have used national security exclusions and excuses to withhold certain information from me, restrict me from being able to speak about certain things to the public that this national security matter is not bound by any law, and that Ravek can abandon the very processes, the very expert processes that exist to protect individuals and the people around them, as well as the decision makers themselves, from liability if anything should happen. So, you know, I would ask the Prime Minister to step in. I would ask Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, to look at this very, very carefully, and I would ask her to review Ravek and its members, because if it is an expert body, then what is the royal household's role there if it isn't to influence and decide what they want for the members of their household?
Do you want the court battle to continue? Do you want to try to see this get to the Supreme Court?
I don't want any battles to continue. There is way too much suffering and way too much conflict in the world. This, at the heart of it, is a family dispute. And it makes me really, really sad that we're sitting here today, 5 years later, where a decision that was made, most likely, in fact, I know, to keep us under the roof. But then once they realised that that wasn't going to work, once they realised that, you know, myself, my wife, and our kids are happier outside of the institution, then please just look at the facts. Look at the risks, look at the threat, look at the impact that if anything was to happen to me, my wife, or my father's grandchildren, if anything was to happen to them, look where the responsibility lies. You know? So, yeah, there's a duty of care that has been completely thrown out the window. And that doesn't feel great. You know, whether we agree or disagree, and there's a lot we agree on, there's a lot that we disagree on. But that aside, where is the duty of care? Because, as I said, life is precious, and it is very clear that from 2020, because I was no longer allowed an official role, and because I decided to remove myself eventually from the institution, that my life got devalued from the highest score to the lowest score overnight.
And how does that make you feel, given you have expressed numerous times that you do not want history to repeat itself?
I will always protect my family, and now I have a family to protect. So everything that she went through and what happened to her is incredibly raw every single day, and that's not me being paranoid, that's just me not wanting a repeat of the past.
Yeah, I don't want history to repeat itself. I think there's a lot of other people out there, the majority, that also don't want history to repeat itself. Through the disclosure process, I've discovered that some people want history to repeat itself, which is pretty dark.
That's quite a statement. Who do you think that is?
He can't say it.
I'm not going to share it at this
Of
point,
course.
you know? I know all the names of the people that were involved in this process. And again, you know, you have to question, why wasn't I put through the same risk management board that everybody else was put through, including members of my family?
And you reject it not because you're no longer a working royal.
Sorry?
And you reject that it has nothing to do with the fact that you're no longer a working royal.
Whether I have an official role or not is irrelevant to the security needs that I would need. Let me rephrase that. Whether I have an official role or not is irrelevant to the threats, risks, and impact on the reputation of the UK if something was to happen. And again, that is proven by all of the examples that exist out there. So for me, having an official role was conditional on keeping security. But for everybody else, people who have chosen this life to enter into public office and then leave, get it for life, regardless of whether they have risk or threat to their name. And by the way, I agree with that. I think that is absolutely the right thing to do. That if you come in and you serve your country, even if it's a minimum of 4 years, that you get the protection that you require because of your public service. I was born into this position. wasn't a choice. I've served my country for 35 years. I believe that I am still continuing to serve my country. Public service is my life. That is the dedication that will never change. And then all the other bits and pieces that are added to that. You know, there are very, very real threats that exist out there. Some that are known about, some that are being withheld. And for people in power and responsibility of decisions to know that those threats and risks exist, but to turn around and say, well, because you don't have an official role, your life doesn't actually matter anymore.
That's a
You
excuse.
can imagine how I feel about that, but you can also imagine, not even imagine, that is the most illogical argument in the history of arguments.
And finally, just because you mentioned, you know, your connection to your country, your public service, after this years-long battle, do you think your relationship has changed with the UK? Do you feel let down by your country?
That's a big question. At this point, I'm feeling very let down. You know, it's the minority of people, especially those that read the tabloids and the press themselves. The press themselves have incited so much hatred towards myself, my wife, and even our children. That's hard to forgive. You know, there are decisions that have been made. There are things that have happened since 2016, especially throughout my whole life. But let's just stick since 2016. There are things that have happened that I can now forgive. I've moved past that. I can forgive my family's involvement, my father, my brother, and my stepmother. I can forgive the press to a large extent as well for so many things that have happened. What I'm struggling to forgive, and what I will probably always struggle to forgive, is that a decision that was made in 2020 that affects my every single day, and that is knowingly putting me and my family in harm's way. Everybody knew that they were putting us at risk in 2020, and they hoped that me knowing that risk would force us to come back. But then when you realise that that didn't work, do you not want to just keep us safe? Whether you're the government, whether you're the royal household, whether you're my dad, my family, despite all of our differences, do you not want to just ensure our safety? And I'm calling for, the Home Secretary and the government to do a review of RAVEG. And I'm also asking for an R&B assessment that I haven't received since 2019.
Just because you spoke there about forgiveness, it sounds like the last step to repairing relations with your family is the security issue, by what you said there.
100%. Whatever noise has been created, whatever stories have been written, this has always been the sticking point. And, put yourself in my shoes. If you step back to try to create a different role, the same official role, but a different working relationship. social role, but a different working relationship with the institution that you were born into for the sake of your wife and your own mental health and your child, which now, of course, a lot more has come out because I felt as though it needed to come out.
Yeah.
The other side of the story needed to be told. God forbid anything should happen. And I don't regret that at all. But 2020, when that decision happened, I couldn't believe it. I actually couldn't believe it. I thought with all the disagreements and all of the chaos that's happening, the one thing that I could rely on is my family keeping me safe. And not only did they decide to remove my security in the UK, but they also signalled to every single government around the world not to protect us. And not only did they decide to remove my security in the UK, but they also signalled to every single government around the world not to protect us.
Wow, that's a shame.
Savage AF. Savage. Savage AF.
That's a shame. This is the part where he cannot forgive them. That is a shame. Wow.
How are you feeling about this decision?
Even the reporter is taking it in. It's very hard.
Because clearly you have 2 children, Archie, Lilibet. They're not able to see their grandfather, their uncle, their cousins, in a way that you feel is safe for them. So what's your feelings kind of moving forward? Is there any way that this could be resolved?
The only, I mean, firstly, I'm devastated. Not so much as devastated as with the loss that I am about the people behind the decision.
These people are savages. Savages. Children involved. And you know what came to mind? What happened in South Africa? Archie's room. The fire. All of this. These people are savages. Let's finish it.
Feeling as though this is okay. You know,
Wow.
Is it a win for them? Is it a win that, you know, that I don't get the protection that the threats and risks and impact say that I should? I would hope they wouldn't consider it a win. I'm sure there's some people out there, probably most likely the people that wish me harm, consider this a huge win. But you know, there have been so many disagreements, differences between me and some of my family. This current situation that has been ongoing for 5 years with regard to human life and safety is the sticking point. It is the only thing that's left. Of course, some members of my family will never forgive me for writing a book. Of course, they will never forgive me for lots of things.
It was necessary, though.
But, you know, there is... I would love reconciliation with my family. You know, there's no point in continuing to fight anymore. As I said, life is precious. I don't know how much longer my father has. You know, he won't speak to me because of this security stuff. But it would be nice to reconcile.
Okay, so it seemed like the father's still not picking up the phone. This was after the result of his review for security. So the father, that's the most recent interview of him since the Oprah interview where he said the father's not picking up his phone call, that he come back to that topic again. So Charles still not talking to him. So let's continue. It's almost done.
As I learned through the First Nations throughout Canada, because of the Invictus Games, their goal in life was always truth and reconciliation. And I turned around to them in many conversations and I said, right, but reconciliation can't come without truth. Well, I've now found out the truth. I've shared some of it with you today. A lot of it exists out there, whether people choose to ignore it or not. You know, so it would be nice to have that reconciliation part now. If they don't want that, that's entirely up to them.
And now that this court battle is over, do you feel you will be able to approach your father and speak about some of those issues?
I mean, no, I don't think he would ever want to talk about it. I think he would just push it aside, and the argument will continue to be this is a government decision. It may well be a government decision, but how did they reach that decision?
Mm-hmm.
When the Rabbit chair, the first place that they went to was the palace to understand what it is that the royal household or what the royal family want for me. I have never ever been allowed or offered to make my own representations. Not in 2020 and not for the last 5 years. And the new Rabbit chair continues to avoid answering some very specific questions that I have. And one of your previous questions that I think is really important is this case-by-case basis. For me, and only me, there has to be a royal obligation in order to receive protection on UK soil. And I think that speaks volumes.
Wow. So the Ravik went to the palace and asked the palace, what do you want them to do? So who's in control here? Not Ravik. Well, in a way, yes, but why did Ravik took that step to go to the royal household to ask what do they want their final decision to be? So it's like they went to the puppet master. The puppet asked the puppet master, what do you want me to do? And then whatever Ravik said is what the puppet master said. So Harry is saying it without naming names. Okay, proof, does Harry have security? Is Canada location leaked? Proof is not true. Okay, at BBC, just encourage William to take up a small project in UK and see to its logical conclusion, and he might change the way the British youth see him. Okay, at BBC, working royals is a perfect example of an oxymoron. The supposed working are all lazy, the non-working or the hard-working royals. The royal couple in USA has more than enough to show how work is done. We can measure their achievement if you put smart to it. Doesn't that mean that the king, his father, has deliberately exiled Harry? Yeah, that's exactly that. Exile Harry and his family, as well as put their lives in grave danger, just asking. That's exactly that, what he said at the end, where Ravik went to the royal household and asked the royal household, how do you want me to treat that particular case? And there it is. All right, they want him unalive. Bag it for God. The royal family are ruthless. Shame on them for how they treat Harry and his family. That for me is the worst part. The fact that they want them never to be protected anywhere in the world, that is just pure and simple evil. Yeah. And Harry had to put this out there. All right, he leaked his own location and his wife and done nothing. Oh, please. All right, let's black this one. All right, so I'm glad I cover it. So I think I've seen bits and pieces of this interview. So because when I finally came across it and I saw the timing, I was like, I'll leave it for another time. So when I get to it, I get to it. So I'm gonna get ready to go to the gym. Thank you for watching.
We live in Naka. It is a great privilege to be with all of you today.
You know, we ask for forgiveness and please come back.
As you saw me find the love and happiness that I'd hoped for all my life.